Hi, this is Curt and welcome to another edition of Fire Law Roundup.
Okay, so let's start in Massachusetts. My son just raced crew. He's a coxswain for his crew team. He was at the head of the Charles this weekend, so why not start in Massachusetts? And
Your
my
kids
old
are in
stopping
college
ground.
already? Oh my
No,
God.
high school. High
Oh,
school.
high school. Oh, I was
He's
going to
gonna-
say, geez.
I think he's going to end up at URI. Not that our listeners care, but
Really?
we'll be visiting Curt in person.
Wow. We'll be able to get him into the fire department down there. So
Yeah, so so you and I, Curt, I think are going to have an interesting discussion on this one. And look, the nice thing, all our viewers know, we get the Monday morning quarterback. We know only what we know from court documents or whatever. We don't always have the background, but I like that we can give our opinions. And, remember, everyone, these are just our opinions about the law. But we're going to start in Massachusetts, where a fire lieutenant he was demoted and fired. But in the same,
I don't know how that works, but
yeah, I assume just to really nail him so he can't get any. I don't know. They demoted him on the same day and then fire him. But nonetheless, he was fired in April. He filed suit. His union has joined him, which we don't see a lot all the time.
I'm not sure about
here.
the standing issue. I think there's a question on the standing, but be that as it may.
Yep. So he was fired. He claims, right? He claims this is just a lawsuit. Not a decision, but he alleges that he was fired because he wore his Class A uniform to the funeral of a firefighter. So look, there had been a long-standing dispute, allegedly, right? I can't stress allegedly enough. We don't know anything. We're just reading from the complaint. But allegedly, the lieutenant has been at odds with his fire chief for years. And there have been a bunch of issues, including the use of the email system for union business. Anyway, at one point in January of 22, this is very recent, he's placed on administrative leave pending a disciplinary hearing on several charges brought by the chief, which sought a demotion and a 60-day suspension. So initially, he's just, looking at being suspended and maybe demoted. But then, and let me read the order, right? He said, until the hearing is scheduled, you remain on administrative leave with pay. That's typical of states. While on paid admin leave, you cannot report for duty in any capacity, must avoid our fire station, and cannot wear a Marlboro Fire Department uniform. Interestingly, they added that, right? And I got to tell you, I do that all the time. When I suspend people, I say, you shall not act on behalf of or represent yourself as a member of the fire department all the time. You're not a member. So here that was his restriction. So then a friend of his or a firefighter dies. He goes to the funeral wearing his Class A uniform, which he was just ordered in writing not to wear. I don't know. I question the back of my mind. Was that part of the order? Did they know this individual was going to die? I don't know anything about the death. Was it like, hey, this is going to happen and I don't want you to wear it? I don't know.
The complaint mentions you're talking about very close timing here about several things. One, the firefighter dying. Two, the disciplinary charges. Three, the fact that the union and the union president filed an unfair labor practice charge. So all of those things happen quickly, and then the funeral. So it could be, it may just be coincidence. I'm not sure.
So he claims that termination based on his wearing the uniform at a funeral in public, which anyone could have gone to, right? It's a funeral. But he claimed that's a violation of his rights to free speech, maybe association, but right to free speech. He alleges he was terminated as retaliation for his expression by the First Amendment. And that's really, he goes on with other things, right? He says the underlying suspension was impermissible. So let me stop there for a second. It's let me first ask you a question. I'm not even sure the answer, although I think it's no, but I'll be interested in your thought. So here he's going to be terminated effectively for violating the suspension order. Don't wear your uniform. If the suspension order was overturned as impermissible, is that kind of like fruit of the poisonous tree? Everything from there falls? Or do they say, listen, even though, which is my suspicion, even though the original underlying order was not valid, right? The basis of the suspension was not valid, you still violated another order, right? Not to wear your uniform. And it doesn't matter that the reason we told you you're suspended and gave you that order is invalid, you still violated another one. I would think you violate the suspension order, doesn't matter, you violated it, that's a whole separate insubordination charge. What's your thought on it?
I would agree. No, I would agree on that. The problem is when you're talking termination, which is discipline terms, that's the biggest penalty that we have. Usually you don't go to termination for like a first offense. Right. There's going to be accumulation of things. Okay. Now, if the accumulation of things doesn't warrant termination, even with the ignoring of that order, then it may indicate that the termination might be excessive. So I think there's with this particular officer, he's a lieutenant, there was a series of things that had happened, and if those first few things that he had done were protected activities because he was the union president, then I don't think it's going to be upheld as a termination. Now, he still ignored the order, and there should be some consequences to the order. Now, there's another part to this, though. If the order was issued in retaliation for his First Amendment activities, right, activities that as a union president, he has a right to speak on behalf of the union and advocate. He has a right to freedom of association, which is protected by the First Amendment as well. So that there could be, and also there could be some collective bargaining aspects to this. This case sounds primarily in constitutional law. There is, my understanding is there's also a proceeding before the Massachusetts State Labor Board on the collective bargaining aspects of this. So like a lot of cases that we see, we've got multiple issues in multiple venues. And he could lose this one and win at the State Labor Board. He could win this one and lose at the State Labor Board. So it's a lot of moving parts to this. So, but to answer the question directly, unlike an attorney, right? I'll try to get right to the point. I think it's possible for him to have violated this order, even if those predicates turn out to be invalid, but it may not warrant termination, may warrant some other form of discipline.
And I got to say, I don't think wearing a department's uniform is freedom of expression. I don't think it's free speech. I think if, I could come up with some ways it could be free speech, right? But it's the department's uniform, not yours. And they have the right to control the use of their property. And my point for everyone listening is, if you are ordered not to do something, why muddy the waters in your underlying argument by giving them a new and separate, related, but kind of new and separate reason for terminating you? Don't give anyone that basis. If you're told you will not go to an event, if you're told you will not wear a uniform, you will not exercise certain privileges, don't. And as a legal matter, I think this gets the freedom of expression and free speech, wearing the department's uniform to a funeral. First of all, there's no speech. Speech is respect. I don't think wearing their uniform is protected. It's their uniform, right? I think if you wore something they said was inappropriate with a message on it to a funeral, like, hey, my chief killed this person, okay, maybe that's free speech, right? But if you wear a message, one thing, I don't know that wearing the uniform is either speech or protected, but don't do it. If you're ordered not to do something, don't do it.
Yeah, I think the complaint is kind of worded so that they can argue that the wearing of the uniform is speech. They can argue that, okay? But they can also argue that the punishment for wearing the uniform is retaliation for other speech.
Right.
Okay, so they kind of couch the complaint kind of so they can make the alternative argument. Now, I think what we see in this case, the case was originally filed in state court, and state court judges handle a lot of different things. They handle civil cases, criminal cases, you know, all sorts of things, but then they also can handle constitutional issues as well. What the town, or as a city of Marlborough, what the city did was they took it out of state court and said, there's a federal issue here. We want to have that case heard then by the federal court. And excuse me for a second, I got people trying to call me. What they ended up doing was send it to federal court, and the federal courts are much more narrowly focused. And I think personally, if I'm representing the city, I want to cut through the baloney here, that
Right.
alternative argument about, well, I got some First Amendment here and I got some First Amendment there. Federal court is going to zero in on this.
Right.
And whereas the state court could as well, but I just don't think the judges there have the experience level and that. The federal court's going to look at this and say, either you arguably do, or no, you don't. And then where it goes from there, we'll see, because he also included a Massachusetts constitutional claim in there as well under their equivalent of the federal First Amendment.
Yeah, my personal prediction is this gets kicked out. You shouldn't have worn the damn uniform. And why are you doing that to yourself anyway?
My personal prediction is somehow this guy gets his job back. Somehow, whether it's the Mass Labor Board or an arbitrator or
after a period of suspension.
Commission, but somehow, because Massachusetts is very, very pro-labor. And, you know, I think if he wasn't the union president, I think the chief is probably going to win this one. But because he's the union president, if I was a betting man, I'll bet he'll eventually get his job back. That's my prediction.
Well, I presume we're going to see a motion to dismiss filed. You never know. But if it was me, I'd file a motion to dismiss on the law and try to get rid of it.